Alright, everybody, I got a really good industry insight for you today. I was trying to hold out until Monday with all the holidays and whatnot, but I couldn't do it. For today's topic, I want to talk more about the very pressing issue of devaluation when it comes to video games and what it means for the market in general. So, by the time you're watching this, it will be Saturday. So, of course, Thanksgiving and Black Friday have already ended. And, of course, Cyber Monday will be coming up in a few short days. And we have seen some ridiculous sales for video games over the last few days. Games like Horizon Zero Dawn, Wolfenstein 2, Shadows of War, and a few more that I'm forgetting right now have all been heavily discounted, at least 50%, and in some places higher up than that. And while you can certainly account this for the holiday season, this has really caused a lot of concern regarding the growing issues of game devaluation. As we said before, thanks to the sheer number of games being released on a day-to-day basis, and of course more of this push towards sales, it's caused the value to drop out for a lot of video games. And I'll give you an example of this. A few days ago, by the time you're watching this, I spent $15 on the Grim Dawn expansion. And then the day or so later, I spent $20 on Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, think about that for a second. On one hand, we have an indie game that I am sure that, well, for most of you watching this, you probably know it, but I'm very sure that Grim Dawn is not spoken in the same circles or as readily known as Horizon Zero Dawn. On the other hand, we have a award-winning game that I think just about every game journalist praised throughout 2017 and will probably go home with a few Game of the Year awards as well. And there is only a $5 price difference there. And on one hand, from a consumer point of view, that's great. I'm getting these games very cheaply. But the problem, though, is that is horrible from a profit margin standpoint for both companies or for both sides. From an independent side, why should I give you $10 or $15 when I can save or hold out for another few bucks and get a AAA game? And on the other hand, why should I buy your very expensive AAA game when I can buy all these indie games at discount, or I can just wait for your game to go on that massive discount? Because as we've seen, it's no longer about quality, or in some cases even time spent out, that determines when these sales come up. I mean, Wolfenstein just came out a month ago, Shadow of War 2 months, and they are both on deep discount, and that is very scary. And when it comes to talking about the game industry like this, a lot of people really don't have this conversation, and I'll tell you why. According to the ESA, who they poll or they collect all the data regarding the game industry each year, in 2016, the game industry earned about or generated $30.4 billion in profit. And that is up from $23.5 billion in 2015. And I know what you're thinking right now. That's a lot of money. But this is the same problem we've talked about before when it comes to understanding the market with the mobile side and the MMO crash of the early thousands. And that is, where exactly is that money going? As we've spoken about before when it came to World of Warcraft, at one point at its most profitable, World of Warcraft was pulling in, I think, like $10 to $14 million a month. That is a stupid amount of money. And when other developers and publishers saw that, they said to themselves, well, the MMO market is pulling in millions of dollars. Let's get in on that. But here's the big problem and what ties all these discussions together. It wasn't the MMO market that was pulling in $10 to $15 or $10 to $15 million a month. It was Blizzard. And those two are very big differences. And what we found was when everyone was trying to make MMOs, all the consumers stuck with Blizzard. And while the MMO market was making a lot of money, it was only being pulled towards one company. And this is the issue when it comes to devaluation. That, yes, the game industry is generating a lot of income, but the question is, who's getting it? And this is the big point. In the past, in the last decade into the 90s, when games weren't going on sale, we were, or the industry was making less money, but more of it was going towards each individual game. Today, it is the opposite, with a few games and properties pulling in lots and lots of money, and everyone else just trying to make do. And as we've spoken about before, the game industry has always been this boom or bust for a lot of studios. And as we said, it is one of the riskiest markets to get into. And that's a very interesting point that we really don't talk about. Because again, a lot of people see the success of stuff like Call of Duty, Pokemon Go, Candy Crush Saga, and you name it, and they think, well, there's money there, so I can join it too. But the video game market, especially for people entering it, is probably one of the riskiest markets to enter because of that boom or bust. And when it comes to devaluation, that's only making things worse. Because again, why should I look at your game for $10 when I can buy a AAA Game of the Year winning probably game for $20? Or why, if you're going to work with a major publisher and release your $50, $60 game, why should I spend that money now when I can wait 3-4 months and get it for $20 to $25? And if you spend several $100 million developing it, how are you going to make that money back? Because as we've said before, for major studios, it can be do or die. And we have seen this before where one bad game, and I'm talking a colossal sinker, can easily ruin a studio or cause major restructuring. And even with that case, we've seen companies that have been succeeding having to let go or restructure itself, such as Telltale a few weeks ago. And of course, the reports of Gazillion being shut down. PopCap, I think, was being restructured, I think, a few weeks ago, or it could have been someone else. And again, even if you are successful one year, that doesn't mean anything going forward. And to give a case in point about this issue of devaluation, I have another prop here. So I've been trying to get into comic books lately, and I went to this bargain bookstore that opened up, and they have a bunch of these Marvel, hardbound collections and stuff like that on sale. So, and they're selling them for $5 or less. That's basically their marketing strategy. So this book cost me $5. Looking at the MSRP, they're saying $20. So I took that home and I read it, and I read the whole thing in about 15 minutes, give or take. And that is a horrible return on my investment. I mean, to give you another case in point, I just spent about $4 or I think $3.49 on Mother Russia Bleeds on sale. I got about 3-4 hours in that already. So why should I pick up any more comic books in that case? And that's the point when it comes to trying to put a price on these products. It's almost impossible to do so. Now, developers and publishers will say, well, you put a price on based on how much it costs you to make. But even that's not working anymore. Again, when you have so many games being deep discounted or competing with each other for pricing, a lot of people view this as apples to apples. They see a game like Grim Dawn or the expansion for $15, and they're going to compare Horizon Zero Dawn at $20 to that. Or they'll compare something else similar. And the same goes for the AAA market. The higher the price of a game is, the more risk there is involved in buying it, because you don't know what that game's going to be like. If you didn't look up anything about Shadow of War or Battlefront 2 and you just bought that sight unseen for $60, you would have no idea about the loot boxes and the microtransactions involved. And that takes me to a very big question that I want to ask everyone. When is the last time that you paid full price for a game, but you paid full price without doing any research on that game? Meaning that you just went to the store one day and thought, I want to buy a video game. What's this for $60? Let me try it. Chances are most of you are going to say you haven't done that. I know I haven't done that. I've paid full price for games like XCOM 2. I'm sure folks watching this right now paid full price for Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild. Again, my mind is racing with all the games that came out this year. But the point is, you did research on those games. You knew about them beforehand. Everyone who bought Call of Duty, what are we up to? I don't even know the name of the latest one anymore. But everyone who bought that game, they knew what they were getting. There were either fans who bought previous games, or they saw the very, very extensive advertising campaign that convinced them to buy it. But the point is, it's getting harder for unknowns to get into the game industry, and more importantly, it's hard to break even. As I said a few minutes ago, the game industry is boom or bust. And for a lot of major companies and major games, they're going to do just fine no matter what happens with the industry. Again, Blizzard is not going to be running out of money anytime soon. And if anyone at Activision complains about Call of Duty not bringing in money, they should be slapped in the face at this point. And that's the big point. That the games that are going to succeed, they are always going to succeed. But when only a few companies are actually bringing in that money, or more importantly, bringing in the money to stay afloat, what does that mean for everybody else? As we've talked about before, when it comes to the independent side, there is a lot that goes into making a successful game that's not about designing that game. The marketing and PR, making sure you do the job on social media. And games like The Darkest Dungeon, or Undertale, or Five Nights at Freddy's, these games succeeded thanks to that extra work. It doesn't matter if the market was in a recession or booming, they were still going to make that money. The same goes for Cuphead. The developers of Cuphead at Studio MDHR, of course, I think they took out a second mortgage on their house. They put a lot into that game. But once they got the backing of Microsoft, and that kind of helped them with advertising and marketing, there was very little doubt that game wasn't going to be a success. And the fact that it turned out well is just the icing on the cake. But again, the point is, we have a few games that are certainly succeeding and bringing in that revenue. But what about everybody else? What about the independent developers who are just trying to get into the market or just trying to break even? I've spoken to a few developers in the past who I've said to them, did this game, make enough money? And they said no. For a lot of independent developers, the ones that you don't hear about, most likely they didn't break even on those sales. Now, they may have extra money coming in from temporary or side work or from a previous game, so they can keep going. But if you were banking on the game that you just spent 2 to 3 years of your life working on to pay those bills and it doesn't work, a lot of people are going to be out of a job there. And that takes me to the final part for this, and what could be done to improve. And that's the crazy part, and it's time to make an ever popular, prediction on a vlog, because I'm sure no one's ever done that before. And personally, I think we're going to have to see a revitalization or a refresh when it comes to the idea of games as a service. Now, when we've spoken about games as a service before, it's been used as an excuse for microtransactions, loot boxes, and DLC. But originally, what we saw with a game like Team Fortress, this was a way of basically removing the barrier of entry and earning money through continued development and microtransactions along those lines. And we've been speaking about this before, and I want to ask you guys another question. Do you think we will be seeing a AAA game be free to play? That is no initial cost. I can download this game immediately, and all the money that game will generate will be through post-release support, microtransactions, probably not loot boxes, as we're starting to see more news about that. But the idea is, instead of creating a game or creating yearly iterations of games, we create one game, and then we just support that. That's our foundation and structure. We don't need to spend money on hiring more voice actors for another project. We don't need to completely redo this game's art. We don't even need to recode or create a brand new engine. We're just using one engine or one game, and we're just going to support that for 2 to 3 years. That would cut down on development costs very dramatically. And it's something that we've seen, of course, with Team Fortress. We kind of saw that with Destiny, where they were trying to shoot forward a game you would be playing for years. And of course, we see this with League of Legends, Dota 2, and so on. But the question, or the big point is, you do know that the millisecond that one AAA developer does that and it works, everybody is going to follow suit. It's the same thing we saw with DLC. It's the same thing we saw with loot boxes. And it's going to present a very interesting market, especially if this starts to become a norm for AAA development. Because then all of a sudden, independent developers are not only going to be competing with each other, they're going to be competing with $60 games priced at $0, along with, of course, the mobile scene. And we're going to wrap things up here, but again, this is a major problem, and it's becoming more and more pressing with each year. To give you another case in point, it's looking like in terms of what I'm going to be spending for the Black Friday and all that stuff, at least for right now, that it's going to come out to about, I'm going to say $68, $70. And with that money, I have bought 6 video games. Now, 6 video games at $68 is a ridiculous savings. But if I was just trying to buy games at full retail, I'll cover 1, and that was about it. But the point is, while these sales are great, it's going to cause long-term harm to the game industry. And this is something that I think about because I always like to look at the long game. I'm not thinking minutes or hours ahead. I'm thinking weeks and months. And if video games, if for last year, for instance, Doom 2016, another celebrated game, probably one of the best games from id Software, that game went down to $30 in less than a year. And we're seeing the same thing happen this year with AAA games. The question is, how are you supposed to recoup that cost or even turn a profit? Now, big publishers and developers will say, well, let's just raise the prices. That's not going to work. You've kind of you've already unsealed the genie or popped the cork on that one. If you're already selling your AAA games at $20 to $25, having an initial cost of $90 or $100 is not going to work because we're just going to all wait for it to drop down. I mean, raise your hand if you've waited for the Game of the Year Super Deluxe version of your favorite AAA game to get all that DLC at deep discount. And the big issue remains, though, is what's going to be done about this, and as a second part, who's going to survive the aftermath when this bubble eventually breaks. But with that very optimistic ending, let's wrap things up for today's Industry Insight. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to suggest a topic that may be a little bit more happier for the future, please let me know in the comments below. But otherwise, be sure to check back daily for more discussions on design on here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. If you'd like to suggest games for me to cover or topics to talk about, let me know in the comments below. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on design, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the Game Wisdom Patreon, you can find us on there on patreon.com/gwbicer. $1 will get you into our private Discord channel where we talk game topics and more. $5 will get you voting privileges for any major event, including the Saturday Night Grab Bag, Patreon-funded goals, and more. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoy more videos here on the Game Wisdom YouTube channel.